Okay, we'll get started now. I'm sure some people will still be joining us as we go along, but given that we have a tight time frame here and we have a lot to talk about, I'd like to welcome everyone to the fourth installment in our Women's Leadership Development series of the Ann Walsh McNulty Institute for Women's Leadership and the College of Professional Studies at Villanova University. This series was developed by a committee led by Mary Alice Morrow and also a member, Jane Mullany, who's on the call, in response to the issues that have arisen over the past year of crisis, and also the need that we all have in these times to develop and strengthen our leadership skills. This installment is about building a smart network and relying on it in a time of crisis. So we will be recording this webinar and you will be receiving a link to the recording after this event. So you can view it again later at some point. The other components of this series were also recorded and links to those are available on our website. So if you missed them, you can always go back to the web and view them. This series is a kind of a precursor or a taste of the kind of leadership development work that we do at the Institute and the College of Professional Studies. And we will be launching a certificate program that's an expansive and comprehensive approach to leadership development this fall. I'll be posting in the chat a link to that development program momentarily. Just a logistical note before I introduce our moderator is that this being a webinar, we will have an opportunity for audience Q&A at the last half hour of the time frame, but we ask that you put your questions in the Q&A and we will be going through and helping select those there. So you won't be placing things in the chat. Please be placing them in the Q&A. That way we'll be able to forward them to our moderator and the panelists when we get to the last half of the program. So welcome everyone. I'd like to introduce our moderator for this event, Jane Mullany. Jane is an alum of the Fitzpatrick College of Nursing at Villanova University and has had an esteemed career in healthcare and as also the lead in JMM Consulting, developing nonprofit leaders. So she's also a member of the Advisory Council at the Institute for Women's Leadership here, and we're really excited to have her on board. In the chat, I will be posting a link to the expansive bios of our panelists, so we don't spend a whole lot of time introducing everyone. And so you should be able to go to those if you want and learn more about each person, but Jane will briefly introduce each person. So thank you, Jane. Welcome.
Thank you, Terry, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful spring day. I think we're getting the first glimpse of what will hopefully be some wonderful weeks ahead as we go into spring. I want to start out, as Terry said, I want to start out by extending a warm welcome to our panelists and thank each of you for the time you've put into the preparation and for joining us today. I want to first introduce the panelists to all of you, and then we'll get into our conversation. Our first panelist is Deneene Brockington. She is a product development and strategy manager at UPMC Health Plan. In her work there, she designs and implements programs to assist members in gaining access to services to meet their healthcare needs. Deneene is very active in the Philadelphia community. She's worked on efforts to end food insecurity. She is currently a block captain for her ward and her division. And currently in her work at UPMC, she is the co-leader of the Employee Engagement Committee statewide, and she is the co-leader of the Diversity and Inclusion Council's Community Activism Work Group. Deneene, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jane. I'm happy to be a part of this panel.
I next want to introduce to you Scarlett DeBease. Scarlett is a certified image consultant. She is the founder of Scarlett Image Consulting. She is also the author of Stop Stressing About Dressing and her work has also been published in the Huffington Post. In her work, she works and guides women entrepreneurs to create their signature style. She encourages women to feel fearless and confident and to be seen and heard. Scarlett is a firm believer that increase in confidence leads to increase in success. Her firm also provides other services for women leaders, including management consulting, brand architecture, executive coaching, and team building. Scarlett is currently a member of several nonprofits whose mission is to support and empower women in the workforce. Scarlett, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm in great company. Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce to you Mia Jung. Mia is currently a partner at Oxeon Partners. She has held leadership roles in healthcare, the pharma sector, and in national search firms. In her work as a partner in a retained search firm, she assists clients in building strong senior executive teams. She is the co-founder of Break Into the Boardroom, a nonprofit whose mission is to bring gender parity into the boardroom, particularly into private equity-backed companies. As of the end of 2020, they have placed 31 women in board roles who are currently healthcare executives and are now also serving in board roles. And they are on their way to reaching their ambitious goal of placing 50 women by the end of 2021. Mia herself also serves as a board member in both the for-profit and the nonprofit sector. Mia, thanks so much. Welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. There's no place I'd rather be, Jane. I appreciate it.
And then I want to introduce to you Kate Waters. Kate is a senior partner for the BTW Group at Morgan Stanley. She leads the family wealth advisory practice, and she places special emphasis on empowering women and working with the next generation. In her duties, she is responsible for the oversight of investments and the coordination of the client services regarding financial management, estate planning, and clients' philanthropic concerns. Kate is a member of the Founding Advisory Council of the Ann Welsh McNulty Institute for Women's Leadership. She is a former member of the board of directors of the Women's Executive Circle of New York. And in 2020, Kate was named to the Forbes list of top women wealth advisors. Kate, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a fun day.
Oh yeah, we're looking forward to a terrific discussion. So as you can see, we've asked each of these panelists because of their deep experience. And as we go through this discussion today, you'll hear that each of them are working on initiatives that are very important to us at the McNulty Institute, such as highlighting the issues of gender equity, working in their communities to build strong relationships, and empowering and finding opportunities everywhere they go to empower women. I want to turn to our topic today. As Terry told us, our topic today is building a smart network in a crisis. Networking has several connotations and definitions. We know that network has a clear technical meaning in our lives, and we rely on networks, the technical networks, every day to accomplish our work. And it's also a word that we use so frequently, both as a noun and a verb. But today we want to talk about networks in terms of human relationships and how they serve us in developing our careers. This work of networking is very important to us at the McNulty Institute. We work to help women get access to other networks of women, and we work to connect networks of women to other networks of women. We've called this segment Smart Networks in a Time of Crisis, because we want to have a conversation and identify what makes networks effective for each of us. And also we want to examine what has been the role of the pandemic in what has been the impact of the pandemic on how we maintain our networks, how we develop our networks. So with that in mind, Deneene, I'm going to start with you. I want to start with you with the first question and ask you and ask all of our panelists to think about, what would you say makes a network smart? What are the qualities that make a good network that is effective? And what are the best ways to go about establishing an effective network?
I love that question. Thank you, Jane, for letting me kick this off.
Sure.
So first of all, thank you all for having me here. I'm thrilled to, nothing gives me more oxygen than sitting around incredible women that we've got here today. So to answer your question about smart networks, I think, and I'll break it down. I think a smart network is one that is built with your professional and personal goals in mind. So I like to kind of start with the end in mind. Questions like, do you want to sit on a board? Are you seeking mentors? Do you want business development contacts? Are you seeking professional relationships for potential career growth opportunities? An example is if you're on a path to be a COO, do you want to build a network of currently sitting COOs? So I think that's kind of starting with the end in mind. And I think a smart network is one that's both intentional and synergistic, and also authentic and non-transactional. And I can double click on that. And the intentional means, like I said, thoughtful about what your goals are and who makes sense to build bridges to. Non-transactional, and this goes to your quality question, really meaning it should be a long-term synergistic relationship where you're mutually adding value. You can't give too much, you can't take too much. It's got to be mutually synergistic in order to really create a flywheel effect. I've seen, as you mentioned, break into the boardroom, I've created, it's a couple hundred women at this point. It's constantly feeding itself. It's a little bit, it's taking off kind of its own, escape velocity at this point, which is so encouraging for me to see. And so I think the qualities are, you've got to have a spirit of generosity. It's got to be intentional. It can't be a transactional, network. I think if you get the right people on board who have that same spirit of generosity, it just continues to feed on itself. And I think in COVID, I think a question that we might talk about is just that these smart networks really build on itself in a remote environment. You can see the intentionality of it. And women specifically, I find that we tend to put networking at the bottom of the to-do list, work, being a mom, et cetera. But if you really are thoughtful about it and you can put it into your weekly planning and have a goal of do one outreach to somebody outside of my current environment to have coffee with, I think that's a good way to start integrating it in and to really, in a COVID environment, be intentional about it.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you. Deneene, what would you say are the most important qualities of a smart network?
Listen, I think Mia covered it really, really well. No, in my own words, though, it's a network that's really just, that's going to work for you. And, professional, personal. However, Mia, you said something that when you said it, I was like, how does that really work? The non-transactional, right? And how it's built over time. And when you are, but intentional at the same time. So, one of the ways I like to approach being non-transactional, meaning that I'm not necessarily expecting something in return, but I am willing to, right? So that to me, when I'm thinking about, creating a smart network with the end in mind and, what does that look like for me? But it really is about how can I contribute? So for me, I look for places, groups, activities, projects, affinity groups where I can contribute. And so that's how about developing a smart network.
Deneene, when we were doing the prep and sharing some of our thoughts with each other, you had some very good examples of some of the tactics that you've put in place in COVID, and maybe you at UPMC maybe you might share one of those with us.
Thank you. Absolutely. So for the pandemic, so of course networking looks different in this space than it did prior to COVID, right? We were used to, you know, particularly at work, right? You're going down the hall, you're stopping in someone's desk, you're engaging in, you know, conversation can lead to understanding and learning more about a person, right? And I'm very big on, you know, you have to talk to people in order to get to know them. But one of the things I found during COVID is we didn't have the opportunity to do that. And so we were relying heavily on Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And some people might have see that as a negative or find it very hard. But for me, I found it as an equalizer. Found that I now had access because of where I am geographically as compared to my corporate headquarters. I now had access to people that I didn't necessarily have access to them before. And so, for instance, I, you know, again, talk about being a contributor. When I started at UPMC, I started the Southeast Employee Engagement Committee. And so, because I saw a need. But since then, since COVID, and I've to be a part of the statewide committee and able to have access to people across the corporation in Pittsburgh that I wouldn't have access for. So now my network has now expanded beyond the people who I could physically interact with. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've seen an opening up of what's possible. Scarlett, how would you answer this question? What do you think makes the network smart?
Well, first of all, to get out there and do it would be really helpful because a lot of
exactly.
And to look to connect, not to look to pass out a business card. But I have to say that when the pandemic started and everybody was shutting down, and then people were beginning to say, okay, let's do something on Zoom, I have found networking to be so much more enjoyable and deeper connections. I just spent 2 days at a conference that I could sleep in my own bed. I didn't have to get in an airplane. And I got to know more people through the Zoom and the little meetings that you put in between in the Zoom than I ever would have in person. I mean, you know, because when you're in person, you tend to go to the same people and talk to the same people. And on Zoom and all these virtual meetings, you're forced to talk to people you don't really know. And that's the best way to network. So to me, it's just the opportunity to be a really great host at a party and put people together that wouldn't talk ordinarily to each other. And I think you make much better connections. And I feel that women, I feel far more supported now than I ever have before.
Yeah. Kate, let me ask you, what do you think makes the network smart? And what are you seeing in this current COVID condition that we're all operating in?
So I always kind of equated networking as a bad, dirty word, similar to diet. And it really started out as a result of being in investment banking, which was very transactional. And It didn't feel authentic to me. And I started off my career in that. I define Smart Network as your community. And I think that community is of people are people that you can help you both personally and professionally. So when I first started off, when I transitioned from, when I retired from investment banking, I like to say, because it was like a lifetime in 2 years, I built people up my professional network. And some of those people were friends of mine from Villanova who were in financial services in different fields. And we started, a few of us started a professional women's group, Women's Executive Circle of New York. And it was people who were kind of mid-level at public accounting, mid-level law firms, mid-level private equity, venture capital. Now everybody 15 years later are partners and principals. So, but those people were my community. We shared things that we were passionate about. We made authentic connections with people. We looked at looking to do something that's going to better the community at large versus ourselves. But in turn, it all benefited us in the end. And COVID certainly has shed that light, because through the ability to Zoom with people at weird hours and have connectivity. 15-minute phone calls or hour lunches now turned into 90-minute phone calls or 2-hour lunches. So we were able to commiserate with each other, but by doing that, we were furthering our deeper connection. And I think that definition of smart network really, to me, is defined as your community.
Yeah, yeah. And we've heard that a lot as we've done these panels and had these kinds of conversation. That theme has come up from our other panelists and in the Q&A as well. Kate, you are also mentioned authentic leadership, which kind of takes us to our next question, takes us to our next area that we want to discuss. A major component of our work at the Institute is promoting authentic leadership. We all lead in different ways that are valid. And so on this topic, Scarlett, I wanted to start with you on this question. How do you network in authentic ways, given the geographic disbursement that we're all experiencing and the lack of opportunities for both formal and informal opportunities? And you touched on this a little bit in your earlier comments, but can you just drill down and talk to us about that in a little bit more detail? Both how do you see it and what are you seeing with your clients?
Well, what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing and what I'm encouraging like my clients to do is to get out there and be seen. And so in this Brady Bunch style of speaking now, of connecting, yep. We are, the best advice I can give to somebody right off the start is put your camera on, because when we're connecting now, you need to be seen. And if you're not showing yourself, it's sending a bad message. And so I encourage everybody to always put the camera on, because that's the first way you're going to connect, by looking. As I said earlier, I said, when back in the days when you'd actually walk in a room, nobody walked in a room with a paper bag on their head. So when you keep the camera off on a virtual meeting, you are basically have a paper bag on your head, which is never a very good first impression. So I'm a big, strong believer in that. And then of course I talk about, clothes and how clothing makes us feel. And it's really important to show up as your best self, because how you are on the outside is going to tell people what you are on the inside. So if you show up as, put together, preferably head to toe, because I like to say the doorbell test. If the doorbell rang, would you answer it or slide on the floor and hope that nobody knows that you're home? So technically you should always be dressed in case the doorbell rings.
Yeah.
Because it changes how you feel. It changes how you show up. It changes the level of confidence you have. So to me, it's really important in the very beginning of all this that women not get too comfortable with dressing really comfortably, because it was beginning to bring people down, I noticed, and making people not work hard or not work at all on their business, on their career. So the opportunities from the pandemic and working virtually has been enormous, because now we're all speakers. Now when we're in a Zoom meeting, everybody's looking at you. It's not like when you were back in a room and you were talking to somebody and there was a whole world going on, but you were just talking to one person. Now we're talking to everybody.
Right.
Totally different now. So I just encourage everybody to really put their best dress forward and show that you care by what you wear. And it totally transforms how you feel and the message that you're sending.
Yeah. Yeah. Scarlett, can you give us some tips and tactics that you find really work across many groups of women that you've worked with?
Yeah, sure. The first thing is to try to wear color as often as possible. And that could mean that even if you wore all black, you add color, like you have some color with your top, add some color with your accessories, definitely accessorize, because that shows that you care about details. And when you show that you care about details, it helps your potential clients and your coworkers know that you care about what's going on, not the big picture, the whole picture. And when it comes to color, when you wear a color that flatters you, that makes your eyes sparkle, your teeth look white and your eyes look white because the wrong color won't, you will then look well, healthier and and younger, and you will look like you will not be.
We all want that.
No, because because the wrong color can make you look like you have under eye bags, can make your teeth look yellow, can make can make you look like people are going to say, "You okay? You're right." You're right. So, but when you wear the things that are right for you, people are going to listen to your words and not get distracted by, "Oh my God, I can't believe she's wearing that same T-shirt," or "My God, there's spit up on there," or there's all these things. So it's really important to pay attention to those details. And if you're only going to do it from the waist up, fine. But I suggest that you don't. But accessories are really important because they can show creativity, they can show personality, they finish a look, and that's it. And one of my tips, real quick for people who are on Zoom but don't know if they're going to be on Zoom all of a sudden, have some sort of top or little poncho you can pull on real fast, and then you're ready instantly.
Yeah. Scarlett, super helpful, and they're tips that we all need as we're running from the kitchen to our office, to somebody's at the door, to the other phone line is ringing.
We're definitely multitasking, but it doesn't mean we can't look good.
Absolutely. Kate, what do you see? How do you see authenticity and networking fitting together?
All right. Well, first, I'm wearing all black, so I feel a little bad that you didn't mention that yesterday, but I've lived in New York City for the last 22 years, and this is my uniform, although I do like to accessorize. So I think authentic leadership, early on in your careers, you have people you're looking up to. And I think, developing those relationships and being around people who are successful and, surrounding yourself with smart, good people, hopefully some of their traits kind of roll off to you. And in terms of authentic leadership, now, as 20 years into my career, it's about trying to give back and trying to work with people in my community to find solutions, not focus on problems, which is a big part of where I think the strongest leaders, in my mind, have kind of put themselves out there. So I'll give you an example. There's our Women's Development Council, or Women's Council at Morgan Stanley that we started about 12 years ago. And we have a Thursday running cocktail Zoom. And it's fun. I mean, we're talking about things that we were all kind of going through during the pandemic, but also looking for ways to give back. How do we help, the women and people of diverse backgrounds who are starting off in their career, who are, missing out on some of that apprenticeship that happens when you're in the office. So,
sure.
And we've come up with ways to do it, whether it's speaking to students like today, or we've hosted an event for people who are on, looking to get onto Wall Street. How do you do that? So we're trying to find ways to make connections. And I think authentic leaders are people who are looking at helping others versus themselves. And I do think this kind of environment has fostered that growth, because we have, we can do it in our homes. So you don't have to travel, and you get all those extra hours of the day that you might be, getting ready or finding an outfit to wear. Now I only have to find an outfit to wear from the waist up. But, I do think that we have more time, and it's been really fulfilling, certainly for my colleagues and friends who have really kind of taken the role of finding solutions for people who we know are hurting, and it could be in communities or, in schools, but I think that defines authentic leadership.
Yeah. Totally agree. Deneene, when we were talking about this in preparation, we were also talking about how authentic networks also have that sense of community. And not to put you on the spot, but might you talk to us about the example you shared about bingo, your bingo strategy to build community?
Yes, I have.
And help open your own networks, but also help others on your employee teams network.
Absolutely. So Again, building on what Scarlett and Kate have already shared, and I talked about this a little earlier. My authenticity is being a contributor.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, participating.
That's what I do. So, we're in this pandemic. Normally during a holiday time last year, as a part of the Employee Experience Committee, we planned the holiday party that we had in our office, and it was great. And we had this delicious food, and we had office decorating contests, and blah, 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 blah. But now, we're not in person. So it's like, well, what do we do? So I said, let's do a virtual games, right? Let's do bingo. And I was just really planning on that for the committee. We were really planning to do that just for the Southeast region. And I go to our associate vice general manager, and I said, this is what we're planning to do. Are you okay with that? All planned out. And she was like, do you think you can do this for the entire state? And I was like, huh? And so next thing you know, for the holiday part, the holiday event, right, for the entire CHC, which is across the entire state, I'm now planning virtual bingo for 700 employees across the state. And I tell you,
love it.
and only because, like Kate said, you want to solve a problem. You want to contribute. You want to figure out how we can still be connected in this virtual space. So it was great. It was fun. We got great feedback. I've shared the link with you. It was very easy, and it was local. It was just a great time. So yes. And yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I think it was a fantastic idea, and clearly it was so well received. And you'll probably be getting notes from people telling them that we're doing that. I want to just finish out this segment. Mia, I wanted to ask you. So you're working with women who are in searches. You're working with candidates, and you're also working with the clients that are searching for the talent. And we hear these stories at all different levels that people are getting jobs totally on Zoom. And I think a year ago, we couldn't have imagined how that would happen. I'm working with a client who's a CEO who has never been to the global headquarters of, he's running the US business, has never been to the global headquarters. We couldn't have imagined this a year ago. So what are you, how are you advising? What are you seeing? As you are managing both sides of it, helping clients access the talent and helping the candidates succeed in their searches?
Yeah, it's a great question. And before we jump in, I'm just going to say I need Scarlett in my life because I too am a New Yorker, so black is my uniform. But
exactly, me too. I'm not a New Yorker, but me too.
But just to touch on that, it's been fascinating. I mean, the industry that I'm in healthcare, particularly in the private sector with private equity and venture, it's blowing up. I mean, there's never been more of a light shown on the disparities, the gaps in healthcare as it relates to technology and how we can become more efficient and provide better access. So we've been doing a lot of work. We've been busier than we've ever been in 10 years. And so advising both the venture side, the private equity side, as well as the candidates has been fascinating because they've hired a lot of folks, to your point, that they've never met before. So on the client side, what we do is, we'll do a lot of background work on the candidate. If they can't get comfortable with, a Zoom, we'll provide informal references, recommendations, our own market insights, just to get them comfortable with the candidate, and they are what they say they are, and they are somebody that can add value to their portfolio company. On the candidate side, what we try to do, and there have been a few that will meet in random parking lots, or they'll find a safe place to meet to get that face-to-face. Sure. Yeah. Culture and chemistry are so important.
Right.
But, we will talk about, obviously, the things that Scarlett mentioned, looking into the camera, always have the camera on. I think as you come across in your communication, you talk about authentic leadership. I think one of the things that's really important is just understanding, what your North Stars are, what really drives you and motivates you, and then having that come through in your communication. What are your core values? I talk about this a lot in terms of what your North Star is. One of my North Stars is doing good and doing well. Always want to say that, always want to say, whatever I do in life, I want it to make a positive impact on people. I also, want to live a nice living in New York. So I think it's important that your North Stars, your core values come across as you communicate. I think one of the things I talk to a lot of women about is, we tend to be a little bit shyer. We don't like to talk about our achievements or our accomplishments. It's really important in an interview. This is not the time to be humble, to talk about what you've done. And it's not all about you clearly have a team, but from a tactical perspective, it's important to talk about, what was the business when you first came into the business? What is it today? And what did you do or your team do to make that difference? So make sure that you are sharp and you're able to really articulate the impact of the work that you've done. And I think in Zoom, something we laugh about is it really has been interesting because it's broken down a lot of barriers. We laughed about that CNN episode where the reporter was shoving his kid out. I mean, now it's like, if we're just bringing all of our kids in because everyone's in the same boat. So there's a little bit of a silver lining. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for those insights. This was a great segment and lots of good how-to and lots of good tips. Scarlett, you will be happy to know I keep a tray of jewelry under my desk, and so if I can do nothing else, I just try to do that. But I think we're all coming up with these new tactics and new tips to just keep ourselves going and adapt to the current situation. The next thing we're going to move on to is we want to talk a little bit about the qualities of the people in our networks. And so we know that there's differences in the influencers in our networks. For example, we know the mentor relationships are built on trust and help us deepen our skills. While maybe others are more champions or advocates for us, help us advance towards very specific goals. We're seeing in early research, at the Institute is seeing in early research, and also from the culmination of all these discussions we've had in these webinars, that women are connecting in deeper ways. It's going differently than just when we would go to events, pass out cards and check a box. And we are connecting in deeper ways, and it's around this shared experience of supporting each other through some very challenging times, and particularly supporting each other through managing our time in new ways and different ways. So Kate, I wanted to start with you and ask you, can you comment on the difference between your thoughts on the difference between mentors and advocates, and also what changes are you seeing as women go about building these specifics in their networks?
Yeah, so I think you kind of stated it quickly. I mean, people talk about mentorship all the time, and I think that is a very critical role as you're starting off. And it is someone who's going to give you advice. It could be everything from, am I wearing the right outfit to an interview, to I'm looking to make a career move, what can I do? And those people really serve as a place for you to brainstorm and things that you may be thinking throughout your careers. I think the most important people in my career, and I think of friends of mine, have been people who are champions. And those people I kind of identified were when you got outside your comfort zone. And Mia kind of mentioned it earlier, but I do think that you need to get outside your comfort zone and put yourself in places that you will be seen, and people will recognize that. And Deneene brought it up. It's a way to make connections. And I think those champions that, certainly early on in my career, put me in places and positions that I normally would not have had access to if I didn't nurture those relationships. So I think that is a very clear distinction. And I think throughout this crisis, they have been the ones that are most open to ideas. Deneene was talking about a story yesterday when we had our run through about a person, I think it was her boss, who she really didn't think she might have a connection to, and who was very receptive to her ideas. And I think if you have the right champions that are saying, hey, listen, we value your advice. We understand what the problem is. This is a good solution. Let's go ahead. And they put you in positions to do it. And I'm a doer by nature. And I've always been a team player. So whether it's a coaching situation or, now mentoring other people, I think, being given the ability to go out and lead has really happened as a result of those champions. And those people evolve over your life. But once, I think starting that early on was really critical. And I got it in the weirdest places that I didn't expect that I would find those people. But it all comes back to nurturing the relationships and finding a connection with people. And then people will really go out on a limb to support you and put you in positions to shine. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kate, in our preparation, you talked in really meaningful ways also about the role of the cross-gender networks. And can you talk a little bit about the influence, that has had, what your experience has been with that in your career, especially in finance?
So obviously financial services has traditionally been a male-dominated industry. But it comes from the top. They recognize the need to change. And I've been fortunate that I call them male champions, that were champions for me to not only move up the ranks, but also to bring more people behind us. And I think we have a responsibility to kind of give back in that way and try to find people that look a little different than we do. And, and then obviously go and try to cultivate those people and help them throughout their career. And I think when you create a culture of giving back and trying to do the right thing and find people that represent the base that you serve, I think ultimately that translates into obviously a better world, but a better working environment, a place that people feel accepted and included. And I think that Wall Street is trying to break that traditional mold of the white male in the ranks, and they're adding more women, they're adding more people of color, they're adding people of different ethnicities. And again, I think as the world becomes more global, and Scarlett was talking about it. She was at an event in Paris the other day, sitting in her bed. You could do those things, or maybe you weren't sitting in your bed, but you slept in your own bed. That's right. But I think that's changing, and I think this is going to be a really good thing that's going to change for the future. But how women and men work together, I think is critical to our, not only our country's success, but our individual and personal and professional growth.
Yeah, very well said. Mia, in your search work and also in the breaking into boards work, do you see women networking just in their own sectors or moving beyond their own sectors, their own areas of competence?
It's a great question. And I love what Kate said. It resonates with me so much. I think I've been seeing more and more, and it's probably as a result of healthcare, because the technology side is really starting to integrate into healthcare, seeing more and more expansive networking, and whether that's functional COOs across healthcare, finance, hospitality, or if it's, a company that has a technology overlay. I'm seeing much more of it. In the boardroom, I'm doing about 6 board roles right now where they're looking for marketers who come from outside of the industry, because, healthcare, education, companies, industries that tend to be a little bit slower on the uptick are trying to pull from the best talent from the finance sectors, from the technology sectors, et cetera. So I'm seeing much more kind of cross-pollination. And for me, as I'm trying to source for great women outside of healthcare, I've got some awesome sources that I can go to, and they've got their own networks that will introduce me to great CFOs in the hospitality space or incredible marketers in the retail space. So definitely seeing more of it. I think the sum is bigger than its parts is real in COVID particularly. And so we're all trying to wrap our arms around each other.
Yeah. Great point. Deneene, what are you seeing in your space, and particularly what's been your experience or the experiences of your teams as they network with others with different social identities?
So I am going to just step a little bit and just share how I try to start my day, right? And I think this is a really, really important for me because I do believe this has an impact on the people that I connect with in my network. So I try to start my day with a daily prayer. I am so happy and grateful that the universe is arranging people, places, events, and circumstances so that all my needs are met and my heart's desire is fulfilled. And I thank you, God, in me, through me, and around me, in Jesus Christ. And so it is. And so that, when I think about, you know, mentors and champions and coaches, right? When we have something in us, when God has purposed, or the creator of the universe has purposed our lives, right? And we want to attract, you know, we don't always know who we should be connected to, right? We think we know, but we don't always. And I say that to say that obviously I'm an African-American woman. And most of my career, I've worked with smaller nonprofits, and you know, my network has really been with smaller nonprofits with predominantly African-American. So I'm now working in a place that it is the most corporate kind of space I've ever been in. And there are a lot of white men. And so it's the first time I really, in all of my career, have had such interactions with white men as my manager, the VP, on my teams. And recently I applied to be a part of their diversity mentoring program. And one of the things they asked on the application is, what do you aspire to be? What position do you aspire? And, you know, I was like, listen, I want to be an EVP, right? I put that on the application partly because when I look at the leadership of the organization, I don't see anybody that looks like me. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be me, but I put that down. And so I really thought it's a diversity mentoring program. I'm a Black woman. I thought my mentor was going to be a Black woman. My mentor is not a Black woman. My mentor is a white man. And he is an executive vice president. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to work, right? When we think about a mentoring relationship, right? You know, it's one where you get vulnerable, you share, like it's something that should last, right? And we're just at the beginning of our journey. We've had 2 meetings, so we're scheduled to meet monthly. And I just had to decide, I said, I'm going to be open to the experience. And I am very excited actually by the possibilities. So, I mean, we've had 2 meetings. He actually may be on because I shared the link with him, and he said he was going to try his best to make it today. So I even thought that was, you know, really that he was going to try to show, be supportive of me in this way. And so, you know, so when we talk about, you know, out of our comfort zone, or be willing to engage with people that don't look like us and have different cultural experiences than us, I'm living it right now. I'm living it right now. And I'm very excited. And honestly, I expect this relationship to grow. And I expect that this person, you know, the roles will be interchangeable, because I don't necessarily think a coach, mentor, and champion have to be mutually exclusive.
Sure.
And he could be my mentor, but he also could become a champion.
Right. Deneene, so well said. And thank you for being so open and so brave with all of us and sharing that experience. You shared some of that when we prepared, and I just found it so inspiring. And so thank you so much for sharing that with the group. I think it's really helpful. I want to just finish out with Scarlett, just to say, what are you seeing as you're working with women entrepreneurs? Do you see them networking outside of their sectors? Do you see that outreach the same or maybe broader than in earlier times of your career?
So before I answer, I just want to talk to Deneene. Deneene, you know, my whole philosophy for now is that the world needs a second chance now, and that we've had this groove for so long of doing things a certain way. But when you get out of that groove and you find a new path, it's amazing. And I think it's a wonderful thing what's happening with you. In terms of networking, I am everywhere now. I spoke, like before, I think Mia mentioned, I spoke to Paris.
Right.
I slept in my own bed that night.
Right.
You know, I am, because networking groups have opened up to the whole country, so that I can now attend and occasionally speak to a group that I never would have had access to before, because they were always like, it's just our people. And that's one of the beautiful things that have happened, is that there's been like, everybody's more like, come on, come in for a virtual hug. Let's talk, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm able to be in all different, you know, in Ireland or all different parts of the country, connecting with women I would never have been able to connect with before. So the opportunity, the silver linings of this horrible, horrible pandemic and year are there. There's opportunities to connect and to grow your business in your circle of influence that were not there before.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're helping, your comments are helping us sort of take us to our last segment here before we go to the Q&A. And what we have done in all of these panels is we want, whatever are the topics we've been covering, is we want to bring it around to a very future thinking point of view. I think finally at this point, with this being our fourth panel, we can see some light as we look down, and we can see that we think we're moving at a better place from a public health perspective, and that a lot of positives are gonna come from that. So Deneene, I'm gonna throw it to you to kick off our last question, and our question is, what do you think are some of the most effective solutions that have come out of this time? And also, what do you see as the opportunities in as we move out of COVID, as we get to a safer place from a public health perspective, and eventually move, you know, to what we hope is the post-pandemic world? What do you see as the opportunities as we look ahead? What do you feel hopeful about?
Well, I feel hopeful about it all, right? And I said some of this up there, that I think in this space, COVID has definitely stilled the world. And so things that we weren't necessarily able to pay attention to before, we certainly are paying attention to now. And earlier, many of us are working from home, and so we're not commuting. So we now have maybe an extra 2 to 3 hours in our day. And I think while we have been paying attention, I think we're also more open, right? And we're more open to not just thinking about our space in our world in what's close to us physically. And so, for instance, I am currently hiring for a position on my team. And as I'm meeting with the recruiter for the position, you know, she's like, oh, I'm based in Philadelphia. And she's like, well, do you want to just, you know, I said, well, I definitely, you know, have maybe prioritized Philadelphia. I said, but I am open to looking for the best candidate across the state, right? Or even outside of the state. Like, it has opened the doors, because we now have been relying for almost a year on technology that we can still produce and be effective and add value. And it doesn't require us to be in the office with someone. Mm-hmm. And so it has definitely open the possibilities, I think, for all of us when we are searching for that opportunity or someone to join our team, an organization that we might want to support, right? It doesn't require us to be in the physical space anymore. So that is what I see is what I hope, and people who are listening to this panel, I hope that you allow yourself to be open to the possibilities beyond what you would normally look to. And so that there is a nonprofit organization that's working with children that's in California. There really might be an opportunity for you to connect and contribute and be a part of that organization. If you're looking to hire someone on your team, it doesn't have to be someone that's physically located in the same city as you. It could be someone that is across the country. It could be someone that is across the state. And so that really is what I see as the opportunities. And I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think the change is here to stay.
Yeah. Yeah. Deneene, thank you for that. Scarlett, all throughout, you've been speaking and you've been very future thinking and in your comments and speaking in hopeful ways and you did in our last segment. But is there any other specific things that you want to mention that you feel really hopeful about as we look ahead?
I feel really hopeful that women will be able to work virtually.
Yeah.
And actually have bigger and better businesses. And
yeah.
I see it. I've seen a number of fellow entrepreneurs who have had a more successful financial year when nobody in the beginning of the pandemic would have thought that. In the beginning of the pandemic, and occasionally now, I have a few people say to me, "How you doing? You okay?" Nobody cares about dressing now, right? Nobody. And it's like, what happened instead was that women became more aware of how they felt by what they wore and realized it was even harder to get dressed for the Brady Bunch Square than it was. And so I'm feeling great because I have two worlds now. I'm going to have the in-person and I'm going to have the virtual world. So that's double the opportunities to connect and do business than we did before. So I think it's fantastic. This is the best spring ever right now. So
absolutely. I think we've all come a really long way. I know we are all doing this. I was looking at my calendar of this week last year, and because you're thinking, oh my gosh, we've been in this for a year. And I would just like to report that the first Zoom I was on, the whole thing flipped off the back of my desk. So it was not my most effective meeting ever, given that the whole thing was on the floor and people thought I'd fallen off my chair. So it was a little hard to get any serious conversation going after that, but I've come a long way. Mia, how about you? What do you feel optimistic about?
Yeah, I think very similar to what Deneene and Scarlett said, this year has been a forcing function, right? It's definitely made you uncomfortable, but that's where you grow. And so this whole notion of flexibility, I think, is going to be the new normal. And if you want to be able to recruit the most, the best and the most diverse talent, I think to Scarlett's point, women need flexibility. And so I do think we've proven that you can be productive. And I think people have just gotten comfortable with the technologies. So I think that piece. And then the other piece is, I think this is going to be the year of yes and. I think all of us get so busy before the pandemic. We're like, I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't have coffee. I think we're really eager to get back to that physical and human connection. And so I'm optimistic for the roaring 20s to kick in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kate, how about you? What are you feeling optimistic about as you look ahead?
Well, last year was supposed to be the year of no for me because I was overcommitted in things. But
how did that work out?
Yeah, more things just keep on coming. I think one of the best things that's happened is there's greater empathy in the workforce.
Yeah. And
I know as being a working mother in a traditionally kind of male role, which I don't even think is the case. I want to preface, I think this is the best time to be a woman entering the workforce. I really feel so strongly about it. There's from the top, they want more women that are qualified. And I think the greater empathy that's happened, whether it's a result of seeing someone's spouse come across the room, you know, in the back, or kids walking in. And I think that's happened more for my male colleagues. I think my female colleagues have always been jugglers. We've always been able to figure it out. I saw a funny cartoon, and this is no offense to any man, but it was a woman, it was somebody hiring, and it says, "We'd like you to do the job of 2 men." And the woman responded, "So you want me to, this is a part-time position?" I thought it was funny, but I think that the ability to be more flexible is only going to help attract more people and retain more people, especially women in the workforce. So I think this is great. I mean, we've been talking that this is kind of the 4th industrial revolution that's going to happen. And if you look kind of historically and what's happened in past pandemics and across the globe, I mean, I think there is a lot of pent up demand. I think there's much more creativity. Products like Zoom were not utilized. I mean, maybe 1% of the population utilized, and literally within a month, everybody was utilizing them. And you can go down, whether it's in healthcare, with testing and all, there's so many positive things that are going to come as a result. And I think personally, the ability to be able to try new things. I love that Deneene starts off with the morning prayer. I have I have a 5-minute journal that I keep next to my bed. That, you know, it's just practicing gratitude. And I think that that's permeating. And I think there's a sense of we're all in this together. And it's not, you know, we just came back from surviving. Now we go into thriving mode. And I feel really optimistic. And especially for young people who are entering the workforce who might be scared, I think it's the best time. I think of myself as having 3 children in middle school, that I'm able to be there and be there more present than I was before. And I think that that's something that will stay and continue. But I think the hybrid model is probably going to be what works best. But I am very optimistic. I think there's a V-shape recovery that'll happen. And whether it's the roaring 20s or whatever it is, I'm very optimistic about the next few years for our country.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks to all of you for sharing that optimism, because we definitely wanted to close out this segment with that message of hope, that feeling of hope. So the last thing we want to do is just take some Q&A from our audience, and we're going to learn together, because I've never done this. So let me just look here.
Jane, so this is Terry. I've queued up for you. So if you just click on Q&A, you'll see open for answer online. So just if you look at the open, you have lots of great questions from people. So
all right. Let me just take a quick minute here. Let me just look at this for 1 second. Scarlett, this first question is for you. The question is, the person says, I couldn't agree more with Scarlett's take on networking in the Zoom world. Thank you for your suggestions. Are there any other learnings you believe we can take forward as we emerge from COVID and move into this hybrid world of partially virtual and partially in-person environment?
Well, you know, okay, generally speaking, it's to always be prepared to be seen and to be seen the way you want to be seen. So if you're going to, you know, so just think, you know, somebody broke your heart once, or some boss, you know, really screwed you over one day, and now you're going to bump into them. The way you want to be seen when you bump into them, that's pretty much how you should be dressed all the time. When you're going out, you're going to go on camera. At home, bathrobe, no problem. But I mean, but you need to always be ready. And because now the opportunities, you know, like Kate said, there's going to be so many opportunities coming up that we need to always be ready for it. And I know people who wear shoes. I actually have shoes on now, who wear even shoes in the home now, because mentally it prepares them to be more together, you know. But basically, I do think that women are going to have a very hard time being seen in public again, dressed from head to toe, because it's been a whole year. So I'm actually, I think I might actually do a webinar. Yes, you have to wear a bra again. Yes, your feet might hurt again. Lipstick, what's that? You know, pants with a zipper and a button. Oh my God,
Right.
that?
Right.
So there will be some preparations, but it'll be like everything else. Once you get back on the horse, you can ride again, but never confuse dressing well to being uncomfortable. That is not true. You can be incredibly comfortable and still be sending the right message to yourself and to others.
Yeah.
No matter what you weigh, by the way, size isn't the issue. That's never the issue. It's the right clothes for each person.
That's great. Thank you. Very, very helpful, usable tips there. Here's a question that maybe we can go around. What kinds of things have each of you gained from working with colleagues who are earlier on in their careers? Have you experienced some two-way mentorship, gotten some insights from working with women younger in their careers at a different stage? And maybe we'll go around. I'll just go around to everybody. Mia, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm usually in industries where I tend to be the youngest, and I am now in one that I'm the oldest woman in the room. And I feel so lucky. I tell all of them, I'm like, I love my Gen Xers, I love my millennials. I think I feel great about that I can teach them, but I learn so much from them. I learn things that I feel like are a little bit hardwired in my head in terms of how I view the world or how I view topics. They teach me about technology. They teach me about, what's important to their generation, which is different than what was important to mine. I learn so much from them, and I feel so fortunate to have them in my life. But mutually, I'm constantly connecting them. I constantly think back that I was helped when I was younger. I remember when I got out of Villanova, my dad was connecting me to all of his contacts. And so I do the same. I think that spirit of generosity and that halo effect has to continue. But I feel like I get more from them than they get from me. And I tell them that often. It's just their fresh energy, their fresh set of eyes on things.
Yeah. The two-way. Kate, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I think that the younger generation is much more focused on sustainability and working for a purpose. And I think that that's kind of always existed, but I think now we have a better platform to allow those kind of things that are meaningful to people to enter into their professional lives, where they often did it we did it in our personal lives if you were involved in the nonprofit space. So I think that connectivity to hear what's important to them and being able to act on it, and also trying to find solutions that we can help to solve some of the things that are important to newer people in the workforce. I've always had younger people on my team. I've often had mostly women on my team that I have that relationship. And again, I think the technology thing is like the obvious one. And I laugh because I used to be the only one who knew Excel in my whole company, and now they have like crazy models that they're able to do. So, but I think more on the things that are important to them, and it is very different than my generation, which is very different than my parents' generation. And I think that ability to have a multi-generational approach to making decisions and strategic planning in a company is critical. Because if you look at the transfer of wealth that's going to happen over the next 10, 20 years and the demographic shift, it's really going to be into that next generation. So I think understanding them and having the ability to work with them one-on-one has been great. And I also agree. I think I get more out of those relationships than I think that they do. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Deneene, how about you? What's your experience? You've done a lot of work with, employee experience committees. And so what have you learned from working with some of the younger team members?
So it's very interesting because I think I moved into a space where I'm the oldest person on my team, right? And so including my manager, right? So I actually agree with some of what Mia and Kate have already shared. Younger people, I find that the younger women in particular they are very much more, I think, certain about the type of organization that they want to work with, right?
Yeah.
Corporate culture and corporate values become very, very, very important when we talk about retaining younger team members, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm telling you, like this pandemic, we were still didn't happen. The whole world saw. We came together and as an organization, and we started creating these safe space for difficult conversations about social justice issues. And out of that, this whole Diversity and Inclusion Council became a part of it. And I'm really proud because our leader in the Southeast was really very instrumental, a catalyst for the whole corporation. So we have this whole social justice town hall. But one of the things that became really important, and I remember one of the younger team members on the team started talking about it. Well, what are the numbers? Like, it was really important for the corporation to be transparent with the diversity numbers. And so honestly, the corporation didn't really have a mechanism in place to really be as transparent as it should have been with those numbers. But now we're working on it. And that was because, I want to say a younger team member, that was really important. It wasn't just about talking the talk. It was about showing that you can walk to work. I think that is how move, right? When you're bringing in younger millennials or the next generation coming in as corporations, as leaders, as part of another generation, that's going to be really important for us as leaders to be able to show in a very transparent way how we're doing. And I think that's going to be really, really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Scarlett, what do you see in working with some of the younger women who are entrepreneurs, in the early stages of starting their business? What have you learned from working with them?
What I've learned is that I can learn from them. And I have to say, there was a time where I would look at someone younger and go, I have so much to teach you. But now I'm learning from younger people. And I think it's great because, knowledge is power. So I can share my wisdom about what I do, but I learn from younger people, technology things, social media. I do a lot on social media. I knew about Clubhouse before my daughter, who's in her 20s, did. Man, did that make me feel good. I had to teach her.
That's great.
But they're very smart. They're very smart. And I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll take one more question. This is a good one, and we'll go around. I think this is something everybody has had some experience with, which is, the question is, I'm looking to switch careers from a technology-heavy industry to the nonprofit space, and would love to hear your perspectives on networking and moving from one industry or sector to another. Deneene, I see you nodding. I'll start with you, and then we'll go around.
So I actually have experience with this. I'm still in a nonprofit space, but in my career, I started off in arts. I was very heavily in the arts, and then I moved into social service, human services nonprofit, and now I'm in healthcare. And so I went to Villanova, got my MBA, and it was there that I was like, there's this whole career that I didn't even know about, and this whole corporate social responsibility, right? And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to really be perfect for that, right? And so I really had this whole path where that's what I wanted to do. And I reached out to people on LinkedIn. I was at events. I asked for informational interviews. I got informational interviews with some heavy hitters here in Philadelphia. And was very, 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 very thankful and appreciative and learned a lot. But one of the things, and I feel like was a major faux pas for me, and that was that getting back with Mia was talking about transactional, being non-transactional. But in this space, I believe that I was approaching it in a very transactional way. And in that it did not yield the results that I was looking for. I made connections with people, and my expectation was like, hey, I'm going to meet you. I'm going to all that I'm wonderful about and what I can do. And you're now going to think of me when there's an opportunity that opens up on your team. And it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way at all. And how I landed at UPMC, again, it was because one of my sister's friend, they were expanding into this area, help with planning an event. And I helped with that. And that's how I got to UPMC. But once I'm here in this space, there were things that became really important to me, like employee engagement and, those areas. And so what I was able to do was able to create a lane once I got here. But my thinking that I was going to, meet these people, meet these corporate social responsibility managers and leaders, and they were going to meet me and they were going to open up an opportunity for me, just didn't happen. It didn't happen that way.
Yeah. Kate, how about you? What advice do you have on this, and what experience do you have with this?
Yep. So I'm a big believer that you got to put things out into the universe. Deneene was talking about it. When you're going the LinkedIn route and trying to find connections, I think that's great. But I think you have to really clearly define what you're looking for, say it out loud, and have to be able to articulate that to the people that you are speaking with. So one of the things that I've told people who I've mentored in the past is whenever I connect you with somebody, you should be asking them, who else can they connect you with? And I think that is a way to be more intentional about your approach. And if you're looking to make a career change, listen, I think the Villanova network is so strong. There are people in every industry, and I wouldn't be afraid or ashamed to say, hey, listen, I went to Villanova. I'm looking at your company. This is a company I'd love to potentially look at. How do I, get that? Can I talk to you? Sometimes those informational interviews will not go anywhere, but I think you just have to get it out in the world of what you're looking to do. And eventually things happen, and trying to put yourself in places where you can get noticed. I know this is a different environment to do that, but it is also a lot easier for someone, like for instance, I'll give you 10 minutes of my time where I'm sitting at my computer at my home that I might not have been able to do in a different environment. So I think it's trying to find exactly what you're looking for, put it out there, and then find the people who are going to help you get to the final place that you'd like to be. Yeah.
Mia, how about you? As you're working with candidates, you must be working with candidates who at times are wanting to shift from one thing to another. And how do you support people with, the whole idea of transferring of skills and also, what would be your definition of the informational interview? Deneene, you're right. That is such a great, that's such a great strategy. Mia, how do you advise clients around the informational interview and also talking about wanting to transfer skills?
Yeah, well, I guess I always think about it. We always talk about folks who might call me and say, hey, I'm a CFO. I want to move from the healthcare industry to the tech industry. And I say, it's easier to do that in the CFO role. So make that move as a CFO, and then you can move around functions once you've built your credibility up. I think as it relates to, I couldn't agree more with what Kate had said in terms of, you should be very thoughtful, intentional about what you're looking for. But I do believe if you approach people in a very informational gathering way, like, hey, I saw what you do. I'm really kind of picking my head up and trying to get smart. You look like you're in a great role. Can you just tell me about yourself, what you do, so I can calibrate with my, so I can start to calibrate on what's resonating and what's not resonating. And then ask them exactly what Kate said. Is there anybody else I can be speaking with? I don't think you should throw the resume in your face. It's a follow-up. I also think that you should say, what's interesting for you? How can I be helpful for you? Write that down and follow up, because that's how this kind of virtuous cycle of giving and spirit of generosity feeds itself. Definitely a thank you note, definitely a follow-up if you get a job, keep them in the loop. I mean, that connectivity is really that non-transactional piece that we talked about. Stay in touch with people, keep them in the loop. I get lots of emails like, thank you so much for your advice. I'm so excited to let you know I landed in this spot. And it's great because there's so many, there's just so many loose ends out there of connections you've made and you don't know what happened. So just to keep and close the loop is constantly staying in connection, updating, and then making sure you're feeding what's important for them. Yep. Jane, I think you're on pause. Scarlett, do you have anything to add?
Oh, she's perfectly frozen. Now, I was going to say that, this one word, you just mentioned it, but I feel that connection, the possibilities for connection are stronger than ever. And that the support that women give each other now is, I think, on a deeper level than we've ever had before, a more authentic level, not to want to use that word too much. But, I also would advise people to hire a coach, to hire a professional. One of my biggest regrets is that when I started doing what I'm doing, I had plenty of coaches as clients, but I didn't hire a coach to give me some really good business advice. And that was one of the best decisions I've ever made. So it's nothing wrong with paying somebody to help you further your life and career.
I love what Mia just said. And I think it's so critical about once somebody connects you with somebody, you really should circle back with them and let them know where you are. And that helps on two fronts. One, it makes you look authentic, right? Which is a theme that keeps on coming up, but it also kind of keeps you in the network, because you never know when you may need to go back to that source again. So, it's all about creating bridges, and I love 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. You should always have that. You should always be trying to make connections with people and keeping those connections alive, because that's what's going to help you in your career as you go through different stages of it. And it's your community, it's your champions, it's every mentors. So I think that those connections are so critical to maintain. And I wouldn't take for granted even a 10-minute conversation with somebody. I really think that will help you.
And to your point, take the time to say thank you. Yeah. When somebody gives you some advice or support, take the time to say thank you in a text, an email, a card, because not enough people say thank you.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Deneene.
No, I just want to add too, because in my story, I didn't share that part of it. So while yes, 3 years ago, I had these informational interviews with some very hitters in the corporate social responsibility space. And today I can say some of them are really a part of my network. And we are, beyond LinkedIn, right? Not that we're chummy or buddy, but if we see each other, we're at a conference or we're at a networking event or something, panel today, we talk, we catch up as a community to share, but also, so yes, I do say that from 3 years ago of me being a stranger and to now, I can say that, they probably, some of them really actually know my name, where they may not have known that before, and vice versa. So yeah.
Deneene, thank you for that. And I'm sorry about that little technical difficulty, but I'm back. Kate, I know that there was a question you wanted to take. So let me throw it to you to take that question.
The question I think was around Mean Girls and the office. And I think it's like anywhere in the world, whether it's professionally or at your kid's school or anything at large. But I do think it's just sometimes you just have to let water run off. I like the term Sally Krawcheck said once. It was like be like a duck, like let the water run off the back. You know, you can't get involved in everybody. You're never going to please everybody. You got to find your own people that are passionate about the same things that you are. And it may not be in one group, but there are other groups. And I really believe that. I did have instances where I had women intentionally blocking me early on in my career. And my boss said it great. He goes, they look at you as a threat. That's a compliment. And I never thought of it that way, but I thought I was on the outside. So, you know, I think if you're in a situation like that, you just have to find your other group and not go down the path of trying to please everybody, because it's never going to happen. And I think that can be said for men and women, but I really do believe that that world is changing, and it's just, again, finding your community of people that share the same passions and values, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah. Can I just chime in? Because I saw
yes,
that. I saw
most
that.
Definitely.
It made me sad. You know, it makes me sad, because if you think about men where networking is a sport and they were kind of born into a team, I think it comes from there only being limited women at the top. And so for you to be in that spot means that this other person has to sacrifice. And I think the way you get away from that is just bringing more women up. I do believe that all tides rise the boats, because I just have never understood that concept of Mean Girls. You know, this is a team sport. We all have to lift each other up. But I agree with what you had said.
Yeah. Oh, thanks to you both. And that's a really encouraging and hopeful note to end on. Thank you so much to each of you. I'm going to give it back to Terry to take us out. But again, I want to just thank each of our panelists for your wonderful conversation and wonderful advice and insights for our audience.
So thank you, Jane. Thank you to all of the panelists. This was so wonderful. And as Jane said, chock full of great information. Please, for those of you who are on, please note there were a lot of resources that were thrown up in the chat. So please feel free to look at those, click through. The two things that I want you to remember, first is that if you were really interested in digging deep on strategies and tools for building your own smart network, we are hosting a free workshop on this topic, hosted by or facilitated by Michelle Gianfrancaro of the Villanova School of Business and myself in 2 weeks. So the link was put up in the chat for that workshop. So you can start to do a lot of the things that people had mentioned on the in their comments in your own analysis of your own network. Second is, if this is something that you were really interested in expanding on and learning more about and spending some in-depth time on yourself, we will be launching a full certificate series this fall. And I sent, again, a link in the chat for that program, which we are looking to open applications for in the next week or so. So if you click on that link about the Women's Leadership Development Certificate, you can find out more about that program and the opportunity to invest in your own leadership development as we look to all of the hopeful changes that everybody mentioned in their comments. But again, thank you so much to everyone. Somebody asked if we could repost the link. The chat history should be on there. If you open your chat, you'll see the links at the top for that. So I could repost it, but it would be the same thing that you'll see right above your comment there. So, and thanks again. And please keep your eyes out for more information about what's to come from the Institute.